Hello, everybody, and a very warm welcome to this next session of the Coma UK conference. Welcome to all, whether you're joining us for the first time or this is one of several sessions you've been to. This one is, as you can see, about the money, pounds, shillings, and pence. It is to get into this absolutely crucial area of shared transport policy practice. I don't think I need to say to anybody that we are in a recession here in the UK currently, inflation at 40-year high, and the list goes on. So, headwinds for all involved, whether that's authorities, whether that's users, whether that's providers, are clearly pretty strong. We've seen some significant shifts in the funding environment for operators. We are seeing some considerable financial stresses within authorities on top of those they were already experiencing. So I think we are likely to get into these issues in more detail. But for us at Como, with just having refreshed our bike share guidance, we see these issues intersecting all the time. And we are keen to stress that there is no free lunch out there. There never was, but there really isn't now. And that if we want schemes to be delivering on public policy goals, we need to be seeing them as part of public policy in action towards decarbonisation, not just as a freebie or something on the side or even a potential cash cow, but rather as part of a wider sustainable transport network. So I'm looking forward to getting into all these topics with our brilliant speakers today. We have got four. It's Graham Risby of peer-to-peer platform and car club provider HireCar, their chief exec and founder. Chris Slade at micromobility provider 15, Will Jansen at micromobility provider Human Forest, and Matt Park of Steer, whose many years consulting experience in the sector, is also chair of Coma UK with his other hat on. Each has been briefed to give us 5 minutes of their thoughts, and so I hope this also generates some thoughts from you as we go along. Please pop them in the chat. We will run through each of those 5-minute segments and then come to questions. Be great to get people up on camera and asking their questions, fleshing them out as they would like to when we come to that point. And I look forward to the debate. So, Graham, could I hand on to you to kick us off, please?
Yeah, afternoon, everybody. So yeah, I'm Graham, HireCar. Trading for nearly 7 years now in the UK. All started by sharing my car. So I was the first car sharer in February 2016. And yeah, so where we are now, landscapes obviously changed quite a bit, but still, excited to get into the economics really of car sharing. So I think, top line, we've just seen huge growth for car sharing over the last 12 to 18 months. For some context behind that, in that time period, say the last 12 to 14 months, we've actually done as many bookings as we did in the previous 5.5 years. To give you some kind of context on the demand that we're seeing coming in. The cost of a car still, I think it's around £4,000 or £5,000 to own. Pre-pandemic and post-pandemic, they still sit idle for most of the time. It's huge waste. I think my enthusiasm for getting people to share their cars is probably stronger now than it was 7 years ago, because you just see so much opportunity and waste out there. For our drivers, so people that obviously actually getting rid of their car, and what we've seen a lot of recently is people getting rid of their second car and using a car club for those trips. So we allow people to get a car from 1 hour up to 10 days. It's completely free to sign up, and it's kind of pay as you play. And we've actually recently just launched a 30-day hire, which is our subscribe and share product, which it seems some good traction. So basically letting people have access to a car for a longer period of time, but they can sub-rent that or sublet that vehicle out, which will offset the cost for their monthly subscription. Just very top line, peer-to-peer, our owners get 30% of the revenue. I've got 2 cars I share on the platform, Fiat 500 and a Corsa, and they'll be paying for my Christmas this year. So on average over the last 6 months, so that takes into effect the busy summer periods and also the not so busy October, Novembers, I've made just over £500 on those cars. And obviously December, it'd be close to £1,000. So again, really great way to make passive income, but also to help your community and keep cars off the road. We then say around 90% of our fleet is individually owned. The other 10% we work with community car clubs and fleet owners where we actually can't get the peer-to-peer signed up. And the economics on that side vary quite a bit. We have some community car clubs that actually just pay us like a monthly fee for our technology and our insurance, and they will take 100% commission. Again, some car clubs we might do like a 70-30 split, but whatever really works for the car club there. But fundamentally, the owner of the car obviously just keep a bit more income. And then we've got a new solution, which is our kind of tech only and pooled car solution, which we've just won an NHS contract, which is essentially giving a company, private or public, access to our booking platform. And they had a fleet of around 250 cars. We're actually going to get around a third of that fleet offline, actually, because those cars won't be used. They can use smaller cars, better utilization via our platform. And the number we have here is it's saving that NHS £171,000 a year. So yeah, we're seeing a lot of demand for that, which is fantastic because we spent millions on the technology, and it's great to enable people to share cars and get cars off the road in any form. So that's it for me.
Graham, thank you very much. Let us move straight along, if I may, to our next speaker.
Hi there, it's Chris Slade, Partnerships Manager here at 15. I'm just going to share some slides with you. Bear with me a second.
Perfect, Chris. Thank you.
Confirm that you can see the slides. Cool, great stuff. So the context, as we know, is we're in a climate emergency, taking Gillian Annabelle's message about honesty from the first presentation. The ambition that we've got is to have household emissions at 4.5 tons in 2030. But you can see that the average household car is producing 4.6 tons of CO2. So it's already exceeding the budget of where we want to be in 8 years' time. So we've got considerable work to do. What can we do about it? One of the things that we have as a tool is long-term rental bikes. So bikes as a service. Think of it as providing a bike for a month or a year with maintenance and customer support included. And this is significantly capex less intensive, shall we say, than bike share schemes. Because you don't have to have stations or redistribution. People are taking the bikes home. And it is complementary to bike share. So bringing up a slide that you may have seen already shared by Benoit earlier yesterday. But you can see that they're both complementary as models. Bike share serving particularly the dense city centre with 20,000 bikes, with 40,000 bikes serving the outer suburbs. And there's clearly great work to be done in the suburbs which are highly car dependent. So the session is about the pounds and how we can deliver this cost effectively. And a French study which has looked at the difference between public investment between long-term rental and cycle hire shows that it is significant less investment per kilometre of public spend. But why do we need public investment? Well, you can see here that you've got a variety of different models on offer to residents in Paris, and you can see that it's a very different price point. So you can see the price point where there's public investment is around 35 to 50 euros a month, and where there isn't public investment involved, you see much smaller fleets of bikes, and the price is much higher, making it more exclusive and reaching far few people. So that's a short but sweet introduction into the benefits of long-term rental and how it can provide cost-effective carbon reduction. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Really interesting perspective. And everyone's keeping brilliantly to time so far. Much appreciated. Will, could we come to you?
Yeah, sure thing. Hi, everyone. I'm just going to do the same and share my slides.
Thank you.
How's that for everyone?
All good. Thank you.
Great. So yeah, my name's Will. I'm from Human Forest. I've been head of operations here since we launched the business sort of from the end of the summer last year. And previous to that, I was head of operations at Zipcar for 3 years. So kind of had an experience there of, I guess, an opportunity to see a more mature shared business, and now kind of in a position where, you know, trying to launch one from scratch. So hopefully through this small presentation, I can offer a bit of review and share some of my own thoughts based on the sort of experiences that I've had. So just a really quick overview. Human Forest, hopefully most of you know, it's a shared e-bike scheme where we're trying to offer free and sustainable mobility to users across London. So an overview, mega quick, of how it works. Very similar to other micromobility operators like Lime, Tier, Dot. You download the app, you scan the bike, they're scattered across London. We're operating in most of the central boroughs now. We have no unlocking fee, and we give users 10 free minutes a day. And we do that by also the sort of digital marketing side of our business. So we're a bit like how Spotify operates. If you have the free version of their app and you get this sort of in-app ad, we do the same. We sell those impressions and we try and give those minutes back to users so they can get on the bikes nice and cheap. So just wanted to kind of try, if I could, to pose a few questions and things that in my experience I've encountered on the topic of the economics of shared transport. So shared mobility businesses and some considerations around it, particularly businesses I've worked in, so Zipcar and this one, Human Forest. Generally speaking, they're highly capital intensive. So for the assets themselves, to buy them initially and then maintain them, there's always a lot of money that you're often having to shell out to keep these schemes going. They're highly competitive, and we found that particularly in Human Forest, where there are a number of other operators in London and obviously around the globe. And sort of over the last decade, where these companies have formed, they've had large investments. So they've really been able to focus on growth at any cost as opposed to value and trying to make these schemes profitable. So to compete against that is quite challenging because they're always coming up with, you know, new offers to get people active on the bikes. And that can be challenging when you're trying to set competitive pricing yourself. It's also incredibly seasonal business, particularly the micromobility space, because as we're just entering now into the winter, it is not kind of unusual to see even up to 50% drop off from usage. This year, we're actually not seeing it quite as severe yet, which is really good to see. I think generally there is a shift in mindset of people being more willing to take their commute and just wrap up a bit warmer and use gloves. So maybe we see that start to change. In terms of then sort of areas of opportunity, I think for particularly shared schemes, there is a real need to think outside the box now to really maximize the revenue side and then be as efficient as possible to try and minimize the cost. And I think more than ever, there's a definite shift towards that. So just a few ideas and things to sort of pose. So for the revenue side, things like the digital marketing model that we've adopted, this is like a really great way of being able to kind of partner with businesses and take some revenue from that, and then allow you to obviously try and discount some of your own offering. And there's also opportunity within like partnerships to really try and peak your utilization in sort of the times where the vehicles aren't being used. So like back in Zipcar, there was the Zipcar for Business model where they rent out the cars to businesses and they use them during the day. And but the weekends you get sort of the obviously B2C side really using the cars. And for us with the bikes as well, we've got kind of employee schemes and things like that that really kind of partnerships with the likes of Deliveroo. So it just lifts that utilization and keeps the usage up. Bundles and subscriptions to lock in users is a good way to think of it. And also a bit of diversification, so potentially offering other modes of transport. We've launched mopeds in delivery, and we're starting to see that rise through the winter, where the e-bike service sort of has declined a little bit, and we look to try and maybe expand that. And the same could be done potentially with new markets as well, where you get your summer months in other markets around the globe when you enter winter time in others. And then on the cost side, I think really crucial to ensure that operations is really well organized. So monitor those cost metrics and make sure that you're not just paying more than you should be for cost per job, like swapping a battery, rebalancing a bike, cleaning a car, whatever it might be. They're things that can really run away. And tracking the performance of that with the people that work for you. We've got examples where we've worked on our own internal systems and seen 300% increase in people's productivity as soon as we started tracking what they were doing, and using monetary incentives to like give them a bonus if they were hitting targets that we felt were sort of the sort of work rate they should be achieving. So these are things to definitely think about. Gamification of things like front end apps to try and get your user base to do more for you, so you can not directly pay for these things like drivers and vans of your own, which are quite expensive and hard to manage sometimes. And I think now we're seeing more of that with examples of schemes around the world where they're getting their users to do the rebalancing and bits like that for them. And then just careful choice of hardware. I think there's been mistakes made by a lot of operators with, choosing the wrong bike or maybe the wrong model of car, which can be then really expensive to maintain and have lots of problems. So I think all of these are examples where if you can try and get these areas right, there's a lot of opportunity in these schemes. Thanks.
Thank you, Will. That's generating some questions, which is good to see. Do pop questions into the chat as we go along here. Matt, can I come to you next, please?
Hello, everybody. My name is Matthew Clark. I'm from Steer. I lead our work in new mobility, transport consultancy. I'm also the chair of COMA UK. As Richard mentioned, today I'm going to be wearing a different hat. I'm going to be representing the role of a local authority representative, as we did have one, but they dropped out. So I will be representing a fictitious local authority. Our authority has a population of about 500,000 people, and the population own around 200,000 private cars. So we've got quite a challenge to move those cars to more sort of useful user space and trips. We have had some experience at our authority with limited experience with shared mobility. We have a car club with 5 car clubs, back to base model, which we don't use as the council, but other people do. But we'd like to grow that. We did have a bike share operator. It was one of these dockless bike share operators that came a few years ago and were very keen to operate, and they came and then they went, and we don't know what to do about that. We thought about having an e-scooter shared scheme. One of our councillors was very interested, but we just didn't have the time to pursue that, so that didn't really happen. What we'll say is that as an authority, we have ambitious targets to reduce carbon, increase active travel, and we have declared a climate emergency, and would really like to get some views from the panel and people on the call as to how we can use shared mobility to assist with this. So taking off my local authority hat, I'll put back on my Steer consultancy and COMA hat. To help with this discussion, I also have experience supporting local authorities and experience supporting shared mobility operators. So I've worked personally on bike share schemes with a range of business models in the UK and overseas since 2008. Car clubs, mostly commercially operated, some with public support. Worked on some e-scooter share. All of those have been privately funded. And then the other sort of models of DDRT, which has moved from commercial operations to supported services, some work on mobility hubs, and also emerging things such as shared e-cargo bikes. So I might interject some of this experience, taking off my fictitious local authority hat. Putting my authority hat back on, what I'd like to find out from people is, what should the role of the public sector be? Should we be simply facilitating private operators? Do we need to secure funding to use a terrible American phrase, move the needle more quickly? How can we make shared mobility more front and center in our new transport strategies? We'll be going through LTP4. Be nice to have shared mobility as a front and center, not just lip service. And really, how do we work with private operators and also community groups, which I think will be important to unlock the opportunities. Thanks very much.
Super, Matt. Thank you. Okay, let's have everyone up on stage if we can and get into questions, which we have a few of them coming in already. I want to start with that question that Matt just asked, actually, to you operators, Graham, Chris, and Will. What should the role of the local authority be?
Yeah, I can
Right.
go first. Is that
Yeah.
helpful? So we're having these discussions at the moment, and I'm going to be really interested to see who's the first council to do this. But from our side, you just kind of look at this and think it makes sense, is that if a council use their own cars, if they have them, or a car club for their staff to use Monday to Friday for business trips, you can also obviously hopefully help with lift sharing into work as well as people start coming back to the office. And one tender we have out, well, one kind of test we have out there at the moment is actually saying to the council that our booking platform can help your staff get into those cars Monday to Friday. It's a very small monthly fee. Again, we've invested in the technology, so it's just allowing the council to use our booking platform, which is the best out there. And that will actually save a bit of money, because obviously with data we can share and help the council to really see the utilization of those vehicles, because there's examples out there and it's incredible. Some cars just don't get used because people don't even know they're there. So anyway, that's a huge saving, and again, it's getting car shares. And then the great thing about our model is that around 60% of our bookings are actually at the weekend. So when your staff member leaves the office at 6 o'clock at night on a Friday, open is literally one little click on our side to open up those vehicles to the general public in your community, so they can have access to vehicles at the weekend when the cars aren't being used by the staff. If the car gets hired out for 2 days a month, that will pay for the technology, so it's all kind of self-funded. You're then promoting active travel in your community. People can get rid of those cars, and hopefully we can get those cars to be electric as well. So yeah, I think councils can work with operators in a much more intelligent way, sharing data, making sure that we just don't have lots of waste out there. And then our ask really is, if a council does want some kind of car club or car sharing in their area, just to make parking costs a little bit cheaper, because there's areas where we see lots of demand for car sharing, but it's just so expensive to get a permit, so it doesn't make it worthwhile. And the last one, I think a great example of a kind of a council getting behind car sharing is our recent contract with Swale and Faversham in Kent. I'm from Maidstone in Kent, so it's quite nice seeing a council down here actually lead the way. But they've got 3 cars that they're sharing. One's electric, and when we went live in Faversham, there were like 5 people signed up. We've now got over 300 people that are using those cars. Our repeat bookers are between 70 to 80% a month. So for the council, it's kind of cost neutral, and hopefully they'll actually be making money. And it's allowing the people in Faversham to actually get rid of their car and have access to one on demand. So yeah, there's lots of other stuff, but I'll pause there, conscious that got other people. But yeah,
Thank you, Graham. Yep, loads there. Chris or Will, could I come to you with that same question of what's the best role for the authority from your point of view, Chris?
Yeah, very expansive question. I think it depends what you want to achieve. If you're wanting to achieve high levels of ridership through affordable tariffs that serve more or less all of the densely populated area of the city, regardless of whether they're rich or poor, and you want a scheme that is built on a solid, sustainable business model over 5 to 7 years. The type of model that we've seen that works is capex investment from the local authority, and then profit share and an element of vandalism risk shared between the operator and the local authority. Generally speaking, the local authority is the best to leverage the most value from sponsorship, because a sponsor can play off the different operators at the bid stage. So they're generally best placed to go out to an agency for that. And I think the proof is in the pudding as well, of an open book financial model, so that both the local authority can see where the investment of the scheme, and can see where the revenue, they can clearly see the model, and can see that it's for operators in the UK, with the context of things such as vandalism, it is a challenging environment to make it sustainable over 5 to 7 years, which is why it needs a really strong public-private partnership and the upfront capex investment.
Thank you. Really clear stuff. Will, let's come to you.
Yeah, I mean, I would probably just add that I think it's important for any authority to try and kind of have some kind of strategy and try to really focus on what that is going to be. And I think we're seeing one thing I'm definitely witnessing here is just in a complex city like London, where there's a lot of different authorities having their own rules. That's kind of it is actually quite challenging to have sort of one rule for everything. And so like we had one example around sort of parking. We've got one borough that is taking a really aggressive approach, and they are about to provide a couple of hundred parking bays for bikes for micro-mobility on the street, and they're taking that away from resident parking. Now, I think for this borough, it could probably work from the answer I heard from them, because they said they have a lot of private people that have permit for their car, but they also have private parking, so they can park off the street, and they've got a bit of capacity to do that. But then there'd be another borough that maybe is that all of its residents near enough have to park on the street. That might just not work. So I don't know. I think the strategy is really important around and potentially, leaning at this stage on operators to sort of assist at least with like the data that they're collecting, and just being as proactive as possible to try and to get some answers that allows things to be deployed and done responsibly, because I think that's the only way that these things are going to succeed. And at the moment, it's clear that we're in that kind of murky area where the operators are having to also then be quite aggressive to prove that there's value.
Thank you. I'm going to do a couple more chairs questions, then we'll get into the questions and comments in the chat. Maybe bring people up if they want to come up to ask them. Great to see some stuff going in there. So next one from me, what are the biggest myths that you would say you encounter on this economics theme? What are the big things that stakeholders, whoever they are, think are true about what you're trying to do, but just aren't true? Matt, I can see you nodding, so I'm like, yeah, I'll victimize you on that one to start off with.
Well, we found as a local authority that the idea that you can leave things to the private sector and just things will happen without getting involved is not really the case. So certainly if you take car clubs, we feel that we need to have a role to kind of unlock the parking. So if we have sort of residence parking, maybe the model from Hire Car would work, but in terms of having sort of car club vehicles that are on the system 100% of the time, we would need to kind of permit parking permits, and maybe we haven't really worked through how to do that. Our experience with bike share is that in the sort of, although we've got 500,000 people, we think probably some upfront funding is probably needed to facilitate that sort of introduction at scale. And the other thing is actually trying to think about these things together. So we've been looking around at examples of people who've done good things with bikes, good things with scooters, and good things with car clubs. And we struggle to find any examples of places who are doing good things in all these places. So maybe there's a role for a sort of a more holistic strategy rather than thinking about these things one by one.
Yes, thank you. And I want to come back to that holistic point. It's a point someone else has touched on from another angle in the chat. On the myths, though, anyone else want to come in on myths that you would love to shoot down?
I'm struggling with that one personally. I don't know if it's because I've been doing it for such a long time, and yeah, I think you see lots of people say stuff. Yeah, I don't know. It's say car sharing side, it's difficult. Maybe one of the myths is for our side is that everyone kind of share a car. I suppose a little bit frustrating that, you know, even in a group here, I don't know how many people, 100 or so, that I imagine everyone's obviously quite passionate about, say, sharing in any form. I'd be surprised if 10% of people actually share their own car. So it is actually quite difficult to get people to share their own car. I'm not sure if that's a a myth or not, but it's getting a bit easier. But I think actually one of the myths on that is actually that I do is that basically the private to share your car, that you always hear people say, oh, about the damage and all this kind of stuff, and it just doesn't happen. Like we've been doing this for 7 years. People look after actual private cars a lot better than car club vehicles. People that met my car, they know me, and they really do look after the car. And actually, the owners, they go above and beyond actually what we might probably do as a car club. Like car owners are extremely passionate about their vehicles. They would go out, clean a car half an hour before booking, and actually really look after their car. So maybe that's one myth we come across still, that private car sharing won't work, but it really does.
That's definitely, yeah, that definitely counts. What are the other barriers? There's the damage bit. What are the other things that people raise as reasons why they don't want to do it?
I think it's like keeping up with the Joneses, to be honest. I think there's still people feel like ashamed if they're frowned upon for sharing their car because they need money. And actually it's interesting because we see it with stickers. So we don't spend anything on marketing, but obviously having stickers on the car is a great way. People can sign up for minutes and hire a car, so if they see a car, they can sign up and be in that car. So our peer-to-peer owners, you talk about, put some stickers on your car, and it's quite interesting because at the beginning, everyone's like, no, I don't want to do that. I think they do feel a little bit, oh, people are going to be thinking I'm skint, I need some money, or whatever assumptions. But then 2 or 3 months later, when people actually do start doing it, you can see it's actually really cool, and it's good to help out people, and actually the money's quite helpful and keep cars off the road. So then you have people reaching out asking for stickers, and we've got hundreds of car owners that actually want the big livery on there, but obviously we can't. Outside of London we can do that, or where we don't have our own car club we can. But yeah, anyway, it's fascinating that people go from no, because I think that perception, to actually then all the full hog that actually they really do want branded on there, because they get behind it and quite passionate about it. So yeah, I think perception most probably still is one of the biggest barriers or myths.
Yeah, that is really interesting, actually. Session yesterday about the big thinking tent, and came into this sort of, behavioral psychology space. What do these things mean to people? What unsaid messages are people attaching to stuff?
Yeah.
Chris and Will, can I turn to you with this integration, holistic sort of set of questions? There's a few on this line in the chat. Matt touched on it about not really seeing anywhere doing lots of things well. How much of a difference to you as operators does it make if a place is, not just doing your stuff via procurement or whatever channel it may be, but they're also trying to do something else that is, towards decarbonisation, towards sustainable travel? How much does that impact on your schemes, growth rates, etc., do you reckon?
So for us, in terms of the two types of integration that we see, for bike share is around the physical integration. So putting bikes at putting stations at public transport hubs massively increases the amount of journey. It's your research, Richard, that shows how many trips are made in combination with other modes. That is really important to have those stations in prime positions. In addition to that, it's having the digital integration, so that you've got, you could go to Helsinki, and we've got a scheme there where you can access the bike on the same app as the tram, as the bus, as the train, and that generates more trips in Helsinki. So they're the two ways. And I just wanted to come in on the myth debate as well, which was the fact that I think that you can't have both in the long run affordable fares without affordable user tariffs without public investment.
Okay, thank you. Will?
I mean, to answer the integration one, I think a little like Chris said around I think it's quite good to try and integrate your user base as best you can to create, I think, the strength of the community in some of these kind of in businesses or apps. And I think, we saw this quite a bit in the Zipcar model a bit, where it was like there was quite a sort of strong community that had been there since the start, and then did a lot more and gave a lot more back to like keeping the cars clean and doing more for the fleet. Generally, it kind of made it better for other users. And we see that the same here, where we start the business trying to very much reward for good behavior as well. And I think that's really key in the kind of growth of ideas, and for them to be done responsibly, as opposed to that mindset of like a new business is launched and it's very much just a take from it approach, which then leads often to more problems, vandalism, irresponsible usage. So I think that's I think how businesses kind of position themselves. I'm also happy to quickly on the myth one as well, if it was okay to mention around. I think it's one for maybe a topic of conversation on the funding side. I think there is a perception, or maybe has been, that like, you know, businesses have unlimited funds to contribute towards this stuff, and it's quite a theme that we hear from boroughs, of just that they have no money. And we've again experienced speaking with boroughs where they want to launch a scheme, and they've said, how much do we need to pay you, to other boroughs that have come up with crazy figures that are like, you know, that just wouldn't allow us to operate or be sustainable. And I think that's an interesting one in the current climate, because there's been examples where, you know, businesses have launched schemes and then probably had to withdraw because actually they just can't make it sustainable and profitable. And that's no good either, because you build up a user base where people depend on it and then it just gets pulled. So I think that's something to be thoughtful around, is like a bit of standardization as well around like what's a realistic amount to expect from, say, an operator, and how much should the authorities be having to contribute or sort of the part that they fulfill. So just that was more of a, probably poses more questions, but some thoughts on that.
No, thank you. Perfect. We do to editorialize for a second in the Como bike share guidance that Antonia, thank you, posted at the top of the chat. We do have a grid of ballpark figures to try and give people some sense, particularly people in authorities, some sense of what things might cost. Of course, they can only be frameworks, you know, they can only be guides. Are there any rules of thumb that you think would be useful to cover here about, you know, density, about scale of operations, size of fleet, conurbation size below which things just aren't going to work? I should imagine there'll be different answers for you perhaps, but yeah, anything you wanted to come in on there, Chris?
Yeah, I can chime in. So we've had a massive push in France of medium-sized cities. So places you may well have not heard of, Landerneau, Epinal, for example, where we're launching 150 bikes, well, from 50 bikes upwards. So we can make it work, and we can make schemes that have got one trip per bike per day, which is, you know, on par with a UK average. It's just finding the financial model to make that work. And French local authorities have managed to find that cash. But if you're a small or medium town, or even a rural place, we can make bike share work in your locality, whether it's a train station based scheme, whether it's a long-term rental scheme, or whether it's a bike share scheme. It's a question of finding the right financial model to make that work over a 5 to 7 year period.
Thank you. Matt?
One thing is we've been thinking about as authorities, how the authority can support, rather than necessarily just capital funding, other ways that the authority can support. So I think there's been some comments in the chat about support from property developers, so Section 106 or similar. But there's also kind of how the council travels itself. So one thing with car clubs I've heard is that if the council can guarantee certain use of the car club, and that can sustain maybe more vehicles, or I think Graham was mentioning earlier, having the council vehicles that can be used by the public, you know, when in the evenings and weekends. The other thing is, for example, say a bike share scheme or something like that, if the council could guarantee that its staff will be able to use the service, and, you know, allowing some money for that, and then working with local businesses to, you know, maybe that would be a discounted membership, but effectively ways to support these services to be launched up front in more creative ways, recognizing some of the challenges with traditional funding sources.
Yeah, happy to jump in. Yeah, I mean, it almost kind of answers both around. I think the key in it is utilization. I think for a lot of sort of particularly asset heavy fleets, and I think you could run a really small market but have really high utilization, and it could therefore be actually really profitable if the vehicles are getting used a lot and you've got your other kind of costs in check. Or you could run a really big operation with tens of thousands of bikes, and it could be horribly losing money, because there's too many vehicles, and with more vehicles comes potentially more issues with loss rate and other problems like that. So I think there's a balance to be struck with, like, it needs to be done responsibly by the operator to make sure that at the point where you're winning new agreements, or you're bringing in enough fleets to be able to, like, serve those areas, and if someone opens the app, you convert that to a booking. That's super important to build confidence, especially in something like bike sharing. I mean, if we're replacing the car or the tube, then we need that person who wants to commute on a bike to wake up in the morning and know they're going to get to work on one of those bikes, and rely on it. And then from what you said, Matt, around the sort of schemes for, like, public authorities or businesses, that's how we have tried to do that. And we've got Human Forest for Employee schemes. We try and work with businesses to say, look, whether it's a case of them signing up for minute bundles for their staff, or whether it's us approaching them and saying, you've got a sizable amount of land where we could potentially have a parking bay, and in return we can work with you on sort of supplying your users minutes and the convenience of being able to get a bike reliably. These are really good things to lean into, and it really helps with that utilization again, because you're sort of getting the usage of the bikes. And there's a big part of it, certainly for us, is the sort of organic marketing. You see the bikes around, that's really helpful for acquisition.
Yeah, not really massive amounts to add to that, but the interesting, we looked at some numbers in London, and 2/3 of, or 2 or 3 people in London are now within a kilometre of a hire car. That used to be a mile. And yeah, it's fascinating, that density. Like, again, we obviously see now, really, a car has to be on your doorstep, and then you'll get ready a car, and then that repeat users kind of come. So yeah, still lots of work to be done there, but really good density of vehicles, especially in London. But then the other side of the coin, this is why it's quite difficult for us to, I suppose, answer on this, is that look at some of the closed loops that we've got. Obviously, Emily was on just before us, and obviously started the kind of works with Emily to get the closed loop up in Oxford. But it kind of shows, really, you don't need a hugely dense. So we got closed loops all over the UK now, and there's quite rural areas which they will use say this closed loop, and there's not actually many people there, but you only really need 5 or 6 people to have access to your car, and it could be just as lucrative as a car, in a city. So yeah, it's especially on the peer-to-peer side, it doesn't really matter where the vehicles are. We can work with that owner to get their own demand in, and the car has really good utilization. So yeah, it's interesting. Always looking at supply and demand. It's an interesting one to balance up.
Yeah, thank you, Matt. Can I come to you just with your consultant hat on, not your imaginary local authority one? You'll have had in mind some rules of thumb and ballparks on things as a consultant advisor to stakeholders over the years, I'm sure. Have they shifted? Have we seen some big shifts or goalposts in the last few years, or actually is it all much of a muchness?
I think there's quite a lot of research that's been done around the world of what the most optimum density of bikes per 10,000 people, or cars per 10,000 people is, which is all well and good, but often the world is not as simple as it might seem. So say, for example, you needed a minimum number of bikes. Say you took a city of 500,000 people, and you worked out, based on that density, you needed a starting point of 1,000 bikes. Now, 1,000 bikes is a significant investment, and when local authority funds for trying to fund these sorts of things, they might be able to get a pot of money that will enable them to procure 500 bikes. So what does that authority do? Should that authority go away and wait until it has the money to do 1,000, or should it put in 500, recognizing that this is only half what all the manuals and references say? But my view would be that 500 is a great starting point. The problem is, I think, is if you go to a city of 500,000 people and you put in 50 bikes. Now, Chris's example of a small town or a place where you put in 50, that can certainly work. There's a real danger that you undersupply, and therefore the thing never gets going. I think that's particularly true in a network-based service like bikes, where you need to be able to pick the vehicle up at one end and drop it at the other, and then be sure of one for your return journey. With something like the car club service, particularly the peer-to-peer, you do need a density, because if Mrs. X's car isn't available, Mr. Y's car might be available. So you do need that flexibility. But yeah, I think there's almost minimum levels of provision that you need, and beyond that, I think there's quite a lot of evidence that shows that if you put in a decent level of base service, you can grow from that. I was talking with somebody quite recently, an operator that said that of their services, they were expanding all of them. This is, I'm not saying whether this is a UK or a non-UK, but effectively, if you can get the basics right, then generally you can demonstrate the value of something, and then more people will want it. So I would kind of advocate for saying, it doesn't have to be perfect to begin with, but go with something of a substantial size that you can grow from. Don't go too small, because you may not get another chance.
Brilliant, thank you. Let's turn to questions in the chat now. If anyone, when it comes to your question, wants to pop on video and audio and therefore join us up on stage and ask it and be part of the debate, then very welcome to do so. Gareth, I wanted to come to yours about, on a general level, should local authorities be able to ask for a profit share percentage while still delivering an equitable micromobility service? Now, we've seen in the UK a few moves into revenue share, which comes up every now and again, which is of course a very different thing. That's sharing revenue whether there's any profit or not, and we've put a view out of exercising caution about that. But what about profit share? What do people think?
From our perspective, we're completely open to profit share. Our core business is also to get more people cycling and to grow schemes, and the best way to align objectives is to share profit. It's something that we do. It's something that we do in Helsinki, and it works for the operator in the city very well. It's a scheme that's grown. You know, taking Matt's example of just getting a quality scheme in at the start, 500 bikes, it's now grown to 5,000 bikes. And the profit share there means that everyone's on the same page. Everyone wants to get more people riding bikes.
Thank you. Will, could I come to you?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have much more to add to what Chris said, really. I think there are just, different approaches to these things, and it is just the biggest challenge we constantly face right now, particularly in London, is just the complexity of having to deal with 32 different authorities with different rules and different wants and everything else. And so it could be a good aspiration, and maybe if it was coordinated centrally somewhere and sort of said, this is how we're going to do it, maybe a bit more like how sort of the scooter trials come about. There's a lot more alignment between operators and boroughs. It might be more achievable, but at the moment it would be a challenge just if it was left to authorities and operators because of varying wants from, how they're deciding to run with dockless schemes. But beyond that, I don't really much more opinion on it at this stage.
So a coherent profit share, I can definitely see the logic of that. Matt?
I think it'll be interesting to think about other modes of transport that are meeting public policy objectives of reducing car use, decreasing carbon, and so on. And just think about why we want a profit share. I understand as a local authority that budgets are tight, but profit share, I can see potentially reinvesting some of that money to expand, supplement, enhance, maybe subsidize, but profit that goes into local authority pots for spending on anything, if we move in that direction, I think there's a bit of a danger that actually we don't get the services that we need.
Yeah, thank you for that. Graham, anything you wanted to bring in on this?
No, so obviously our business essentially, well, it's revenue share. It'd be great to do profit share, but no, so yeah, all for it. And I think win together, lose together is it's a good way forward.
Okay.
I think just going back to just the previous comment from Matt, is with the with the council that we're talking to about using our booking platform for the week, but then sharing the cars at the weekend. They're gonna make a lot more money from sharing those cars than they are paying per platform. And you think it's quite a powerful tool then for that council to give back to their community in some way. So yeah, it works really nicely.
Yep, there are some of those win-wins around to be had, aren't there? We've got case studies on them on the Como site. Can we come to Andrew's question about developer contributions, which Matt touched on earlier, and I also thought was, was a very good one. So Andrew, again, jump up on camera and audio if you'd like to. This is about local authorities need to be much better at prioritizing developer contributions towards shared mobility options, rather than it coming at the end of the queue after road improvements. I'm trying not to editorialize too much here, but I very much agree with the thrust of this. So who would like to get into that?
Yeah, I can take it on. It's something that once the scheme's in the ground, you quite often see developers and employers, in addition, who are crying out to have a station outside their office because it's what their staff want to get to work. So it's making that case to developers and employers early on as the local authority is building the scheme as a way of supplementing the initial pot to launch a scheme.
Thank you. Will, anything you want to say about developer contributions?
I just want to clarify, is this the one around, local authorities need to be better at prioritizing developer contributions? Yeah. I mean, I definitely can agree that there's a really big opportunity, I think, with on the development side. Like we've been working already with quite a few on our partnerships team to get in sort of early and consider it with any kind of infrastructure developments that are happening, and it's been very well received, but I think it's definitely left a little bit more to us privately to engage and then the authority side, it tends to be if it's a development that is kind of more private, then they're often a bit more leave you to that because they don't have such a say on it. And then normally are quite supportive in some ways because they know that it takes a bit of the pressure off maybe them. But I don't know if that answers your question though, or
Andrew, can I ask you directly, if that's okay, is this something you've seen in your work? I'm presuming, but tell us a bit more if you'd like to.
Yeah, so apologies about background noise, but I think for us as a rail, from Southwestern Railway, so I'm a railway operator. The slight frustration for us is that we're trying to to get bikes installed at stations, but it's only going to work if the local authority is also pursuing it as part of a network. There's no point in just having a hub at the station with nowhere to go. And so we're really keen to see local authorities have it as a clear strategy, as I think Matt was talking about earlier, and having it so that the station fits into a wider network. But to do that, you've got to do that over a long period, as others have said. You've got to have a strategy that pulls in developer contributions at every possible opportunity and has a clear ambition for a network. And too often you see in local transport plans or local plans virtually no reference to it, or if they do, they don't then follow it up in terms of actually prioritising it for actual contribution. So I think, as others have said, it's all about a consistent approach, a long-term approach, and having a pulling in whatever resources you can, but taking every opportunity to use developer contributions wherever you can. I think that's certainly what we're looking for.
Interesting, thank you, Andrew. And we're happy to keep chatting to you outside this conference as well as in it about all of that. We do have a report actually, which we'll pop in the chat about new developments, which has this basic same point in it. And we're also engaging central government about this quite a bit because there is a lot of change potentially coming in the UK spatial planning system, and so we're making the case for why that should relate to sustainable transport. Anyone else want to come in on this developer contribution question? Thank you, Andrew, for it. Graham.
Yeah, no, I'm a bit. So Keith from our side, I'm sure has got lots to say about this. I don't know if I saw him on the videos earlier, but no. As for Highcar, I know we've had some great wins with property developers, Section 106s and Section 76 in Scotland. Can't remember, but
25, I think. Yeah, around that region.
But I just think there's so much opportunity and more to be done. And I know with Swale, the council down there have been great and actually got us in front of quite a lot of property developers.
I think we've lost Graham a little bit. Matt,
He deals with this pretty much daily.
sorry, Graham, we lost you there for a sec. Okay, thank you. Matt, can I come to you as consultant again? Have you seen this happen much? Do you see this go awry more than go well, or am I being too negative there?
I think there are some interesting examples, not as many as there should be, of things working well with developers. The observation that I think I have is maybe we aren't so good at quantifying how good value shared mobility is. So if you're a developer that's putting in a major a housing agreement, and you have to build a new road, the price of that road per 100 meters or mile or whatever is absolutely huge. And you look at what you can get in terms of shared mobility for the same price, and in terms of the health. So you talk about the health benefits. I think sometimes in terms of funders are asked to quantify the benefits, the economic costs of things like bike share, and they're being put through very old-fashioned and prescriptive business cases that are designed to approve road schemes and bridges and things like this. Now, many of those things provide connectivity and they provide efficiencies perhaps, but in terms of what they're actually doing to support, carbon reduction and active travel. So I think actually there's a bit of a question about how we evaluate some of these things, as well as, and I think if they were evaluated better, then developers would be more keen to include these things within their plans.
Yeah, thank you. Certainly, compared to that new roundabout, that amount of money buys you an awful lot of shared mobility, doesn't it? Okay, anyone else want to come in on this? Otherwise, let us move on. So I wanted to ask about, are there any examples where, and we could stray internationally here if we need to, where we've seen that looping back of revenues? Matt, you touched on this earlier with well, if funding is going to go to the authority, then surely it should be hypothecated in the jargon. It should come back to sustainable transport. Has anybody seen that working well anywhere, or from, not just necessarily from shared mobility provider contributions, but from congestion charging schemes or from workplace parking schemes, or whatever the revenue source might be? Half. Matt, I'll go to you. Chris, I might pick on you after Matt.
I was just thinking about this. So, and I don't know the answer to this, maybe someone else on the call does. So if we think about the oldest and largest bike share service in the UK, which is TfL Cycle Hire, Santander Cycles, for years and years, there's been a subsidy on that bike share scheme because it didn't cover its costs. My understanding of the recent demand is that demand is now in excess of the cost, so it's turning a profit. What I don't know is where that profit is going. Now, I suspect that given TfL's financial position, it's going back into TfL coffers and trying to make the books a little less red. But effectively, that could be an example where you get that level of demand, where effectively, if that revenue was reinvested into the service, then that could support either fares for lower income people or expansion of the service. Yeah.
What we generally offer in our business model, as I've previously kind of mentioned, is open book working. So it's clear what the money is getting spent with, and we also ask that the local authority does reinvest back in the scheme for expansion, because whenever we see a bike share scheme in the UK, there's always room for expansion and improvement. I'm not sure that there's any UK bike share scheme that has reached its full potential yet. So there's always more investment that can go back in the scheme to grow the benefits for both the operator and the city.
Thank you both. Will or Graham, anything on that you wanted to bring in?
No, not from my side, and it's a bit sad, really, isn't it? There should be at least a few examples. I'm sure there are, but yeah, nothing that comes to mind from my side, especially UK or overseas.
I mean,
it's still fairly cutting edge. Will, sorry.
It's right. No, for us, obviously, as a a pretty new startup. There's, you know, kind of a lot of room for innovation, and we're trying to, the e-bike is our sort of flagship, but like equally we've been investing in like the e-moped scheme, which we've been seeing has sort of started to become a bit of a success with the delivery market, and you know, sort of issues that do surround some of the noise that comes from regular scooters. The fact that we're offering electric quiet ones is the start of something, and maybe that can grow. So I think that linking to diversification, and so for us, definitely trying to build, whether it be sort of a marketplace, a community, and it will allow us to then reinvest profits into other aspects of sustainable travel. I think that's definitely a goal, and something that, you know, we would continue to support. So yeah, and just continued innovation generally. I think, you know, I think when Matt, you said about Santander, I mean, I imagine that the move to electric would have been some form of investment, and they're going to need to probably do that to compete if there's a continued growth in shared private schemes which are offering swanky bikes that boost you along. So yeah, we'd do the same. The market's always moving and bikes are changing, hardware is changing, so we need to make sure we can continue to grow and develop.
Thank you. Going to turn to a question from Paul Roberts in the chat. Again, Paul, if you want to come on video and audio and pop on stage, then feel very free. So this is: increasing bike use and bike share will be more successful with segregated cycle tracks. Is anyone aware of where e-bike operators have worked in partnership with local authority to co-fund, co-produce a business case or a funding bid for expanding a cycle tracks? I think it sort of relates to, you know, to what we've just been talking about, doesn't it? And anyone want to jump in on that? Paul, good to see you. We can't hear you though.
I'll more than happily take that conversation. Two great examples, I think, globally. One, which is Paris. I think London as well. The bike share is typically the precursor to cycle infrastructure. So regardless of whether there's joint, combined, you know, smart integrated thinking about bringing the two together, it's generally the precursor to getting good cycle infrastructure. Paris after COVID, the bike share scheme, which started in 2006, I think, was the precursor to getting Parisian cycling in the first place. In Vancouver, they've got a slightly smarter approach as well, which is where they're designing bike share stations into the cycle infrastructure, so that it means that they're in really high visible places, and they're also providing the space for future expansions. So they've already got that space earmarked for when the expansion plan comes along.
Thank you for that. Will, anything from you, as this is a cycle-centric question?
Sorry, yeah, me too. Yeah, I think on the parking side, it's important to, like, you know, it's something that it's going to be crucial, I think, getting the kind of infrastructure right around parking, because it's the big topic, and I see a lot of questions, and whether we're going to come onto it, but around the sort of responsibility of some deployments. And I think there are good examples where, yeah, more funding is coming towards it from the boroughs, but then via the operators as well. A lot of it does link, which is, you know, the challenge is like the speed of action, and whether boroughs are happy with certain things we put forward, like using marking tape or things like that, which, you know, could be a temporary solution still, but is sort of met with resistance because of worry about whether it's going to, I don't know, work or be, you know, sort of aesthetically not great. But yeah, I think I do think the sort of, at the moment, the big thing is definitely the parking, the sort of cycle highways and bits like that. We're definitely, we think about that as an operator around when we do like ground recce's or map recce's of where we can put potentially parking bays and hubs to make sure that, you know, we get that constant supply of bikes in the right areas where there's demand. So we try and think of it now where we have control. But yeah, I think it's a slow burner for London, certainly, with like influencing change with the authorities, because it's just yeah. But they are, to put it to their credit, they are definitely asking these questions now, and they're sort of being proactive, trying to kind of, I think they are trying to get there, but it's just a lot of hoops to jump through.
Yeah, thank you, Matt. I can see you nodding, so I'll come to you on this. Thank you.
Yeah, just thinking about the kind of improvements in cycle infrastructure we've seen in many of our cities, which is to be commended, and I think is a great way to provide safe infrastructure for bike sharing or other forms of cycling and micromobility. The point about parking and kind of orderly parking, I think, is quite interesting. So we do have a move towards parking on carriageways and marking out bays on carriageways. I think what's quite interesting is that where those things are placed is important. So just to take an example, I was in Paris a little while ago, and Chris will probably support some of this, that the use of the street is changing very quickly. So over the pandemic, Paris put in loads and loads of temporary cycle lanes, and many of those have been kind of made to permanent. There was one area where some electric vehicle charging had been put in, originally for private cars, then translated to the electric Autolib shared car service, then translated to the replacement car club that followed that, and then covered over and a cycle lane put in that area, because actually the space is better for movement, for parking and charging. So we do need to kind of almost take a step back and think, what does any one piece of street need to be used for? I was doing a project in Brighton, and we planned all these parking locations, and then all the cycle infrastructure people said, well, we want to put a cycle lane there. So I would prioritize movement over parking for anything. But it's not to say that bike share parking shouldn't be in obvious locations. So perhaps it's kind of adjacent side streets or something like this. I guess we moved all the parked cars off to put bus lanes in. We need to kind of think about that process and how that might work as we design the world we want.
Thank you.
Could I add to that just quickly?
Yeah,
around
sure.
The sort of that is one thing that definitely is a sort of pro of the dockless schemes, is that we can be incredibly agile, and we've got the sort of virtual parking bays where we do our best to try and find areas of ground, land, whatever, that's a bit more sort of accommodating for bikes, and then obviously try and manage those numbers. And it's not always perfect by any means, but it's definitely a step. And I think where there's been sort of a real opportunity and a need to move quickly to getting more people into active travel, that has been a win for, you know, sort of dockless operators being able to very quickly pivot and just say, irrelevant of infrastructure delays, we can move fast. And as soon as there's an issue with a particular site, resistance from residents or authorities, we can just pull it straight away. And we're doing that repeatedly. We have locations teams dedicated to it. So I think that's a good thing. It's proving a lot. It's providing data back to the authorities to then make those decisions. If you go and plumb in a permanent infrastructure like a Santander rack that I think I read somewhere they're about, you know, like 6 figures to put in or something, you're kind of a bit, either you're going to move it and then waste a lot of money, or you're a bit stuck for a while. So yeah, it's just a case for the dockless schemes, which is a good thing, that you can learn a lot of this stuff along the way.
Thank you, Will. Graham, I want to just adapt the question for you a bit, in that I wonder if you've seen anything of an effect where something like a low traffic neighborhood has come in, and do you see any increased use or you know, uptake of people putting their cars on the platform in the first place, etc., where the conditions for, you know, parking and driving lots and lots and lots of cars aren't so good anymore?
Yeah, it's strange. So Waltham Forest is a good example. I think that's where LTN's actually originated from. But we operated a car club, a small car club in the borough, and it's just flying. So it's interesting, that kind of, okay, is it, as a community, are they already, you know, they've got LTNs there and using different kind of transport, so they don't have a car, there's got to be some correlation between the two. So yeah, and I think because of our business is, we don't do anything under an hour. You know, we very much, if you're doing a short journey, you know, walk, cycle, public transport, and we get asked quite a lot actually if we're going to do one-way bookings like a certain car clubs do, but we're not. For us, it's trying to get cars off the road, and actually when you need a car, you know, a shared car is the best option. So so yeah, I think Emily might, it'd be interesting to, I'm speaking to Emily actually hopefully later tomorrow, because in Oxford I know they've just brought in the LTNs in Oxford, so I'll be interested to hear how that's working. But no, from our side, I think there's a correlation between, you know, if people have had to adapt anyhow, then car sharing seems to be a natural fit for them, which is great.
Yeah, an interesting question. Thank you for it in the first place. Sorry, Paul, that your microphone wasn't working, I think, so we couldn't actually get to hear from you. Talking of parking, I wanted to go to a question that came in pretty early on. It was direct to you, Will, but let's all tackle it, about getting good parking of bikes, and that where that doesn't happen, that's creating resistance. Question from Jeremy Jew about what do you plan to do to stop hire bikes being parked so they block the pavement, creating resistance? Can I put that one to you first, Chris? Let's definitely come to you. Anyone else wants to come in? So yeah, Will, sorry, can I start with you?
Yeah, sure. So I mean, it is a big topic, and I think like it only takes a few kind of poor examples of the parking, pictures for way too many bikes, pictures of bikes blocking pavements for it to kind of very much kind of become the front and center thing around Dockless, and for some people it is. And I wouldn't pretend to the operators, it's something that we're constantly, it's a really high priority and an area of focus. I think though it's worth also stating, like for us, we have a spread of the parking locations that we really try and lean on. Some of it's physical infrastructure, some of it's just virtual, and we do see a sort of 80% plus compliance of people using those as opposed to randomly dotted around. And then of that 20% that are dotted around, the re-rental rate, particularly in the summer, was super fast, so people are moving them within an hour, re-renting, and not all of them are blocking the payment. So there is, just wanted to state that there is a very, very small percentage of that nuisance bikes. And I think until we can get to greater parking density, which is, again, these things have to start somewhere. And I think it's massive improvements have been made over the last couple of years. Authorities are moving to that position. As I've mentioned earlier, there's a borough that's not far off launching a couple of 100 parking bays on street. That's amazing. By next year, we're going to see that in place, and there's far more places then for people to ride and park the bikes responsibly. Just a couple of other really quick things around sort of things that we also try and employ. Technology is a big part of it. So you can try, if you to put in sort of no parking zones where people then physically can't end the ride. It doesn't eliminate it because people abandon bikes. You see even Santander bikes left around sometimes because they're stolen or hacked. The other part of it's the tech in the N-Ride photos and things like that, and there is more technology around sort of validation of like you're parked in a suitable place and not blocking something, and we're testing a lot of that at the moment to try and reward good parking and lean on our community aspect. We've got examples. We did a scheme recently with social media where we were rewarding our users for sending us a photo of any operator's bike if they stood it up because it was fallen over, or if they moved it out of the way of a pavement, and we were giving them back 3 minutes to for doing that. So these are the sort of things we're actively trying to do, and I think it will only get better.
It's interesting. Thank you. Chris, could I come to you next?
Yeah, sure. So excuse the cliches, but I think it's horses for courses. We've got different types of stations for different types of needs. So there's new station types on the market where you can get a lot of bikes into a small amount of space, and that can be done very, very cost efficiently with non-charging solutions. We've got a testbed project in a university campus on the south of Paris, and what we do is that we test all the different types, and actually what we found, it was originally launched as a dockless scheme, but the cities are wanting us to then actually retrofit this to light docking infrastructure. So for us, we've got over 30 schemes in the world, and the vast majority of them are all station based. It's generally what the cities we work with actually want, and what customers appreciate, having a station to pick a bike up from, knowing that you've got a station where there's going to be bikes, but also with the flexibility where we can also drop bikes off in free floating in virtual stations. So we've got the full suite of options.
Okay, thank you. Graham, appreciate it's not fully a question for you, so skate view on this one, but let me know if you want to jump in. Matt, anything you wanted to say?
I think that actually there's a real difference between what operators are doing to encourage parking, because there's two things here. One is having for a doctor's bike, having a place to park that's marked and signed and lined, and we can maybe get there, but it's expensive and it takes a long time to put in. There's also then what the operators are doing. And I think there is a difference between different operators. Some are more encouraging people to park sensibly. Some are sort of, whether it's through incentives, whether it's through gamification. I think some operators are saying one thing and maybe doing another thing. And I'm not going to point any fingers, but if you walk around certain parts of London, there are certain bikes which are much better parked than others across the operators. So I think there is effectively a call for operators to step up to the best. And I think there'll be less of an issue then. So, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Let's draw to a close there. We are at time, I think, exactly. So thank you so much to all speakers. Thank you so much to all contributors also. We are taking a little coffee break, and then back, as you can see on screen now, for final session about government policy. We had the Secretary of State yesterday say to the Transport Select Committee there won't be a transport bill in this parliamentary session, so I imagine there'll be a few things to talk about. And also don't forget our drinks, as you may have heard before if you've been in other sessions, in London and Edinburgh this very evening. Again, thanks to all speakers, much appreciated, and to all of you. See you again soon, I hope. Cheers.